What you just heard as you were walking in was artificially generated music in the style of Vivaldi. This is from David Cope, who's had a long-running project called Experiments in Musical Intelligence. And I paired that with some real Vivaldi, playing it on an instrument probably reached the pinnacle of its design about 15 generations ago. And it's playing the music of its time from about 15 generations ago. But now, what I think I'm going to do to sort of provoke a theme here is to go into how music has been one of the early adopters for this concept of modeling. And in the digital age, when modeling becomes possible, the models that we make, the algorithms that are produced from our models, become the tools that we use. And there's this long history of musical instruments, music technology, which we're going to go through very briefly, that leads to this moment right here, which is from this past year. Oh, no, it's not. We need one more start. And sound. So he's playing Voodoo Child on an iPad. Last year's work, and now we're going to go back to about 7,000 years before, about 300 human generations. And earliest musical instruments tended to be made out of, parts that were available, so bones from animals and so on, and they were supplementing the original musical instrument, which is the voice. So if we listen to this, you're going to hear in your ear, you're hearing the sound that was heard in China 7,000 years ago. We're playing a modern folk melody because we don't have the music from then. But this has a bit of strangeness to it. The tuning, if you hear it, it's not exactly the same. So this march of technology has been pushing ever since then. And so we go to carillons, which were one of the very first instruments to be automated. So this is akin to a player piano roll or a music box, but really large scale. So you can imagine that, composers were able to directly compose on this instrument and edit what they were doing, and edit and preserve it. And those are hallmarks of what came to music in the digital age. And on the way to that, these instruments became enormous. These are still mechanical instruments. They're of the complexity and scale that you see parallel with military technology of the same era. So this is Bach on an instrument from Bach's time. If you zoom in on those pipes, they actually have human mouths at their labia. So the pairing of the voice with the instrument, bringing it out to broad scale, was part of the interest. 15 or so generations ago, there was also parallel interest in automatism, such as this really important march of technology here, which is something that toured Europe in the same classical period in the West. So full digestive tract, feed it things. So another good one,
the chess Turk, also known as Schachtürke, as it was called by its German-speaking inventor Wolfgang von Kempelen, was a seemingly robot-like machine that was constructed in 1769. It represented an early type of chess computer and received tremendous popularity during the following decade. The automaton had about the size and the appearance of an executive desk, encased by wooden planks and doors under which a clockwork-like machine could be seen.
And Napoleon was beaten by this chess machine. Edgar Allan Poe got obsessed with trying to figure out how the heck it worked. And it was 60 years before they revealed this contorted, out-of-work chess player who was squashed into the cabinet underneath. But it had these, gears and things to put you on the wrong track, if you were trying to figure it out. So, fast forward, that was, again, about 15 generations, and now we go back about 4 or 5 generations. We're in analog musical instruments. And what I think is, impressive through all of these is that there's this element of expression that is afforded by the instrument, that the interface is kind of a tool. The tool has been developed to heighten this ability to, make wonderful music. And there's a point that happens not very far past this in the mid-50s when digital computers first were used to generate sound. And of course, this comes just a little bit after recording had been kind of reaching a common practice, and also analog like the theremin. But now, recording meant that we could hold sound in a computer in numbers. And once we had those numbers, we used them to drive loudspeakers. And John Pierce, whose portrait of the computer as a young artist, was a wonderful 1960 article talking about what it means to be able to create those sequences of numbers, not just record them, but as he said, wonderful things will come out of this if we only know how to do them. And he laid out the principles of understanding and modeling music, both the instruments and the composing systems that might be used, building tools for composers, building interfaces that don't look like traditional instruments, and above all, the human perceptual apparatus, and where, once we're in this new age of modeling, we stumble into illusions in creating things that we think we're going to listen and like, and something else happens. And so this is a very fortuitous, very serendipitous effect that often has, where you're working in digital media and it goes sideways, and then you open your ears and say, wow, I think I like that. David Cope's work, which we started out with, has always been a very provocative theme in artificial intelligence conferences. You know, is to what extent does this pass the musical version of a Turing test? And for my part, I've been involved with this discussion every time I meet David. He's got a new tune which has been mined from the myriad possibilities and recombinations that you can get. This is almost like recombinant DNA, the way he does this. He takes parts of things and he moves them around by rule and generates new things in combination. And I'm not a Rachmaninoff expert, but he's got me on that one. It's really darned good. We work in more than stereo generally in computer music. We use lots of loudspeakers, and as is now more and more commonplace in movie theaters and in all sorts of venues. You have surround sound that is much larger than what you get in your home stereo or your car. As we use digital means to also accomplish that, we can build models of musical spaces. And what I'm going to give you here is a recent project from our group where we recreate the acoustics of the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, which really the acoustics have not changed since the first name, when it was Constantinople. And that there was a musical practice in the probably 700, 800 AD that was part and parcel with the acoustics. So one of the fascinating things for anyone who's been to the Hagia Sophia, and I have not, I confess, but people swear that this is absolutely correct, that you clap your hand and that sound rings in the room for 12 seconds. So it's a very, very long reverberation time. So we can take a fingerprint of that and create a model. So the fingerprint is done very, very simply. You take a balloon, have somebody over here with the balloon and a pin, have somebody over here with a recorder, a microphone, get everything really quiet, pop the balloon, and the 12 seconds of echoes circulating around that microphone are all being recorded, and then you take that fingerprint of the echoes for that particular location, and you can do some mathematical tricks, building a model, a convolution model it's called, and we can put any sound into it. So I'm going to play you now a concert from our concert hall at Stanford, where we had to tell the audience, close your eyes at some point, and imagine a bigger space. Let the walls in this space go away, and just let your ears describe the volume of the place you're in, being 4 times larger in Istanbul in that case. So I can't play it for you in surround, which would be the full effect, but you're going to hear some musicians who are performing as if they're in that hall, which affects completely the way that they get back to that original music of AD 700. So now this model, this instrumental aspect of the acoustics has become the thing that we use. In fact, the part being sung by the Russian bass, this guy is enormous. He's twice as large in mass as the mathematician who did the model. Came up and gave him a huge bear hug after the concert and says, "Now I've been there." You know? I promised earlier that I would introduce something that kind of blew me away. And this happened late last year, where there was a deep neural network applied to musical signal. And that's very different than applying it to musical notes or melodies, or what we say is the equivalent of natural language. We're not doing that here. We're actually taking that recording, the series of numbers that are recorded by a digital apparatus. And in normal case, you would say 48,000 of those numbers per second. It's a lot of data. In this case, they would have had to wait longer, so they took it down by a factor of 3. So they sampled this at 16,000 samples per second. And this was piano music. They trained on it, and they let it run, and this is what you got. So it sounds like a piano. It has no grammar. It's a completely schizoid, musical result. But this is really an ostentatious, I mean, in a sense, but a very awesome beginning, So in one sense, it's violating everything about music and sounding really good. On the other hand, it's making a music. And it's a music of its own, which I think is going to be really fascinating in the future. So thanks. That's my introduction to how this hits music. Yeah.